Games aren't movies. The Tomb Raider series feels like it's becoming that snake that eats itself. When they came out during the PlayStation days, it was like playing the Indiana Jones movies. Sort of. But then the Uncharted games came out and mixed that idea up with an 8-ball. But then they did the hard reboot of Tomb Raider and essentially did what Uncharted did to the Tomb Raider series. Kinda having the series come full circle in a weird sort of cosmic way.
While everyone was creaming their collective pants over Spider-Man, I was waiting for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. When you enjoyed a series for so long and you're on a limited budget, you kinda have to prioritize your entertainment funds. Because now I wonder if I would have had more fun with Spider-Man than this game. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is not bad, but I feel more like I'm watching it more than actually playing. Visually, the game is amazing. It's probably one of the best looking games this generation. Like how well the mud moves as Lara trudges through it, and how well it moves and leaves trails. And I thought the snow in Rise of the Tomb Raider was amazing looking, but the mud effects top that. However, I don't think this game is optimized very well on the PC. You may notice little pauses throughout the video, but it only happens in certain areas, so I'm not sure if it's a graphics issue or it's just those areas are not programmed that well. The facial animation in cutscenes is amazing, it's very realistic, and the voice acting is superb, and there's even an immersion factor where the characters will speak their native language instead of English, which I had turned off, but it's a nice feature to have. The music doesn't really do much for me. The previous Tomb Raider games had much better scores. Like the previous two Tomb Raider games, Lara starts off with a bow and arrow, but then gets a pistol, which for some reason is older than the previous games and looks really beat up. The assault rifle looks better, and the shotgun almost looks like one of those pipe weapons from Fallout. It's a visual thing, I know, but it seems like a weird disconnect, especially since I played the previous two games where her weapons had better visuals. The Survivor's Instinct mechanic is very watered down from the previous games. In those, it would hang around for a few moments and highlight everything that you could interact with. Craggy rocks for climbing, surfaces that you could jump on that are also sort of painted white, anything to help you along your way. It disappears almost immediately after you even touch the controller. It does highlight enemies, letting you know which ones you see that are not in the line of sight of others for better stealth kills, but the biggest issue is that it doesn't highlight the climbable surfaces, which normally I would not have an issue with, if it weren't for the fact that this game wasn't so damn dark. On the default setting, you can't see jack diddly, and Lara will not turn on her flashlight. Not that it matters, because the flashlight in this game sucks. It's as bad as those asset flip horror games. The ones that you see on Steam where it's just a circle that lights up the area it touches, with no light spilling off to the surrounding area like a normal flashlight would. The game places a much heavier emphasis on stealth. You can pretty much go through the whole game doing nothing but stealth kills. I rarely ever got caught by enemies. The first Tomb Raider had it so you can take cover and hide along walls. Rise of the Tomb Raider allowed you to hide in trees and bushes. Shadow of the Tomb Raider ups the ante by letting you cover yourself in mud and hide along walls that are covered in vegetation. There's also less combat. The first game in the reboot series, Lara was going up against an army of cultists that would just come out of nowhere, and there was way too many to the point of exhaustion. The second game had more of a balance. There weren't too many enemies to the point where you'd get exhausted, as the fight never overstayed its welcome. In this game, it's like there's no enemies, and the small amount that you get are easily dispatched, and then it's back to either walking around with some platforming or swimming through water, and there's a lot of swimming. Too much swimming, in fact, and it's impossible to drown as there's alcoves for air everywhere, so there's no tension when you're underwater. They also use the whole crawling up through narrow cracks way too much. There's once in the beginning of the game, twice underwater, and there's another where she crawls through human remains. I think I counted a fifth or sixth time, but I can't remember those. There's a clothing mechanic that gives you certain benefits depending on what you're wearing, like quieter movements or better camouflage. One outfit is used to infiltrate an enemy stronghold, which would be really neat if this disguise mechanic was fleshed out and used a lot more. There's another new mechanic, and it's this herbal thing. All that it is a temporary power-up. There's endurance, focus, and perception. You collect herbs and you can use them. which I never used unless accidentally. The only ones that are good are the healing ones, allowing you to heal yourself in battle, so in short, when the colors go gray, use it. The skill system is a letdown from the previous games. Almost none of the skills are as good as they were. They removed a bunch of the fun skills and substituted them with boring or useless ones. They have skills that either require you to get to a certain part of the story or do a challenge to them to unlock. They took away the skills where you could find extra salvage from enemies or extra ammunition. They even took away the skill that lets you recover arrows from dead enemies. It's like they removed all those skills to up the challenge, but there's so much stuff around to craft arrows with, or there's a lot of ammunition laying about in which you'll encounter a lot of enemies, or you could buy stuff from the shops that are located in the cities that you visit. So you would never even need those skills. So it begs the question, did they remove the cool scavenging skills to up the challenge, or was it because they added so much ammo and so little fights that you would never need it? The camera is horrible in this one. It likes to wrestle control away from you to give you that cinematic look. While the angle may look good in a movie, it's not in a game. You'll have angles that'll mess with your depth perception, making you think you're closer to something that you have to jump to, when you're in fact much further out than you thought you were. The camera points you in every direction the game wants you to go in. Even if you want to explore a little bit, you're discouraged from doing so, which seems counterintuitive for a Tomb Raider game. The enemy AI is inconsistent. The cultists can find your hiding spots, but the military guys are dumb as bricks. I've hid, not well against a wall, covered in mud, and just let the bodies pile up in front of me, even when some enemies were in the line of sight of others and have even seen me kill their comrades. I did enjoy the final boss fight though. While short, it was a challenge and felt like a boss fight, and not two quick time events like the predecessor. The puzzles are either not challenging at all or are so hard that you have to guess what the developer is thinking. There's one puzzle with 3 doors and the game gives you the answer to all 3 of them. But then there's one puzzle that I could not figure out. You needed to line light into 2 of 6 walls and then push a lever on the corresponding wall. Needless to say, I failed 4 out of 6 times. And I know that they gave me hints, but I just could not figure out what they were thinking. The story itself isn't even that good. It's actually quite boring until it gets towards the end. Lara is taking the fight to Trinity, a group of people that she fought in the second game and were kinda established at the end of the first one. However, this game completely ignores what the second game established about Trinity, which were an order of knights turned paramilitary that investigate supernatural occurrences and want to use magic artifacts to control the world. But in this game, they turned Trinity into a South American doomsday cult. The leader of the cult still wants to control the world because he wants to protect a hidden city where he was born in from outside intruders, of which Lara and her friend Jonah are the only outsiders to ever seen it in thousands of years, which is also why he had Lara's father killed, although the second game establishes that her father wasn't even looking for that city, and was in fact looking for a city on the other side of the planet. The only thing this game establishes, in an attempt to connect it to the previous titles, with popsicle sticks and glue, and not even good glue, but that cheap white crap that you had in elementary school, it establishes that the main bad guy of these 3 games is a certified dumbass. If they didn't connect this game's version of Trinity to the previous game's Trinity, and just said it was a Mayan cult, then it would have made some sense. Imagine watching the Star Wars prequel trilogy, but watching The Phantom Menace 4 times in a row, Attack of the Clones twice in a row, then Revenge of the Sith once. But do a little twist where they did like in The Last Jedi, where they kinda ignore some of the stuff its predecessor established, where it tries to do something to stand on its own instead of being part of a trilogy. That's what this game is like. I feel like I watched it more than I actually got to play it. I feel like all I did was take Lara from point A to point B, with maybe a few doors in my way. Sure, the original PlayStation games didn't have a lot of action, but there was more platforming and puzzle solving than here. It slowly and painfully builds up to the climax, so when it all pays off, when the game reaches that metaphorical Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader moment, while satisfying, hindsight has you asking, couldn't we have just cut out a bunch of that earlier stuff? The game doesn't ramp up the action until you get to the oil refinery, and from there it's a non-stop ride of awesome, but it's an 8-hour slog followed by 2 hours of fun, and then the game is over. I felt no sense of accomplishment as I progressed through the first 8 hours of the story. I didn't stop playing the game because I was tired or my eyes hurt. I stopped playing because I was bored and then would go on to play Final Fantasy XIV to work on getting my Black Mage to level 50 so I could get one of my retainers to 50 so I could make it a Red Mage, as my Red Mage is the only job that I have at max level. I want you to let that sink in for a moment. I felt that playing an MMORPG was a better and more productive use of my time rather than play the newest Tomb Raider. But one thing the writing gets right, and I mean they knock it out of the park, is the emotion the characters convey. The voice acting helps a lot in this regard, as the performances are top notch. I did not get invested in the game until this moment. It's when the entire weight of Lara's actions finally breaks her and she goes on a rampage. It was at this moment is when I got 100% invested. While this happens around the end of the game, it was enough for me to see it through to the end because I was going to give up on it. When you load up a new game, this message about how it was made by a diverse group of people comprised of multiple genders, backgrounds, ethnicities, religious beliefs, and personalities, which immediately had my mind go to Mass Effect Andromeda, a game that did the same thing so they could say they were more diverse, and while the intentions are good, the end result was bad because it was made by people too new to the job. Same with Sonic Forces. Too much new and inexperienced blood that had no idea what they were supposed to do. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a good mile ahead of those games in terms of quality, but nowadays you can tell when they bring new people onto a sequel, as foundations established in the previous titles will be ignored or changed for reasons that make no sense as to why they were changed. The point of building a solid foundation is so you can build upon it. You don't build upon it, then tear that foundation apart to build upon even more. Because all that's going to happen is it's just going to collapse down on top of you. Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider were better. Those were games you would have needed a cattle prod to get me to drop the controller and probably an elephant tranquilizer on top of it. Because I don't remember ever shutting those games off until the end credits rolled. It's like somewhere along the way they forgot they were making a game and tried to make a movie. Because there are a lot of scripted sections in this game. It's big stretches of nothing, with patches of climbing or swimming or maybe a little puzzle solving. Then it's more nothing, then some action, and the cycle repeats. Shadow of the Tomb Raider's biggest and only true flaw, a flaw that's as glaring and blinding as if you were looking directly into the sun, is the horrible, horrible pacing.
This is not a bad game, and I do not hate it, but I'm just disappointed to the point of depression because I feel like this didn't live up to its predecessors is all. Although, now that I think about it, I should have bought Spider-Man. And yes, I did buy Spider-Man.